Halloween special track. All right. Hey, everybody. You already know, with this creepy music on a Thursday at 5 p.m., you know what time it is. It is time for us to talk a little bit, just a smidgen, about photography. Come on now. I know. I'm so excited. As you can tell by the thumbnail, I have a very, very cool guest that is highly controversial in the photography game. Why? Because he backs it up with receipts. He's got facts with his knowledge. And let me tell you, he can write a Bible or two with what he knows. But today, we only have about an hour. So therefore, we're going to keep it short and sweet. Now, before we get into things, let me kick it off with my little intro. Let's go.
Join me every Thursday on YouTube for another live show of Let's Talk Photography. We cover the latest news, interviews with today's industry leaders, tips, tricks, lighting, cameras, and the business of photography. My weekly live stream is all about crowd participation. You're encouraged to ask questions, talk about the cool camera gear you've got or the camera gear you want to get. Hell, you could just join our open panel discussion during our Q&A portion of the show. The cost of access to Let's Talk Photography is very, very low. For today only, I'm hosting a very low price of free $99 to subscribe and press that bell icon to get notifications of my upcoming live streams. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Give yourself a round of applause. Come on now. We're going to run a little tight ship today. But before I get started, first, if you haven't already, shame on you. Okay, go ahead and follow me on all my socials. Yes, that's right. I'm on Facebook or POC, whatever they decide to call it tomorrow. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Threads for some odd reason, and I'm on TikTok. And that's right. I'm pop locking and TikToking with every other Generation Z or ABD, whatever it is. And I'm on Twitter or X or ABC or whatever Elon decides to call it tomorrow. I'm on everything. So there's no excuse. Go ahead and follow me. And if you have any questions, it's probably best to DM me on Instagram. That's right. I'm on Instagram pretty tough. So there you go. I do want to share before I introduce today's special guest is that where's my okay, here we go. Now I will be posting my thoughts about the latest announcement of the Nikon 28 to 135 millimeter lens tomorrow. So you want to hit the bell icon, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and you'll get my quick thoughts. Obviously, I don't have the lens because no one else does. And but I just want to give you my quick thoughts. We're going to share a little bit about it today because Joe and I were really getting into some great stuff that you all need to hear about. So we're going to get into that soon. So you want to subscribe to see this video. It will be up tomorrow. And by the way, I'm doing a live stream of like a beauty shoot. I'm trying to make sure it works out well this Monday too, a live beauty photography shoot. So stay tuned. A lot of stuff, a lot of creative stuff, questions, comments, concerns. You already know, hit that message board in the live chat. And if you want to support all this magnificent awesomeness you're seeing right now, come on now, press that like, that share, and subscribe. It's only free $99, okay? Quit being cheap, okay? If you actually enjoy this content, the cheapest, most affordable way to support it is hitting that like button. Believe it or not, it does work. It helps. All right. Now, if you're feeling absolutely amazing, you're like, Robert, look, I love the way you're dressed up as Waldo. You got your Christmas tree up already. I got my Hanukkah menorah going on. If you like all that and you're like, this guy is on fire, well, you know what? I won't stop you. Feel free to send a super chat. Okay. Because today, as Joe and I are going at it with our very deep discussion I know we're going to have, I'm only answering comments that are extremely relevant to the topic at hand and or super chats. Okay, we got to keep this nice and tight because Joe and I, we plan to get deep in the weeds. Okay, that's for sure. And if you don't know Joe Edelman, make sure you get from underneath the rock and go follow him on IG right now at Joe Edelman. And I believe I have his direct link in the description section down below. Last but not least, because I see Joe just rubbing his hands, he wants to jump in the ring with me. I know he does. You make sure you go ahead and sign up to my free newsletter. That's right, I said it. It's free newsletter. The link is down below. All right, go join there. I send out a newsletter every other week about upcoming events, and my videos and everything else. That's how some of you may have known that Joe's jumping on my live stream today, or it's because he posted. So either way, you found out and you're here. There you go. Thank you very much. All right. So now before we talk about today's first topic, okay, I'm going to tell you a little something about Joe. When I first got into photography, this is 2012, I quit everything. Okay, my dad was not happy, but I quit everything, and photography bit me good, and I got a rash, and I couldn't let go. Okay, it's just all over now, and Joe was among the very first photographers I not only subscribed but watched religiously. Okay, I'm not gonna name the other guys because they're not on my show. But Joe was definitely among the first top photographers. I appreciate his directness. I appreciate that he backed up his opinion with facts. Okay, there was a consistency of him doing that allowed me to trust what he's got to say. So quite honestly, and I bumped into him twice. I believe it was WPPI. If not, it was definitely Photo Plus. But either way, it was WPPI, and I think the first time may have been Photo Plus. Either way, I bumped into it. He was so nice. Did a little selfie, which he probably didn't like, but either way, I got one out of him. And it was awesome. So since then, I knew that if I could, I would like to get him on here. He is here with us. So without further ado, let us welcome our guest for tonight. Come on now. Yeah.
Hey, Robert. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too. And
hey, listen, right out of the box, I have to file a little complaint.
Oh my God.
It's Halloween.
Yes.
You've got this shirt and this hat.
Yep.
I don't think you understand just how much work it takes to get this costume on. Okay. I feel like you took the easy way out here. I'm just saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I certainly did. And I decided to wrap every big major holiday for the next 3 months. So I have Christmas, I have Hanukkah, I have Halloween.
Your work is done.
That's right. My audience should be satisfied for now. But thank you for coming to the show. If I ever look down, I'm just looking at the computer and controlling things. So it's not that I'm not paying attention, but I do want to say thank you so much. I really liked your live streams, by the way, as a live stream. Or do you still do your live stream regularly, or?
No, haven't done them in a couple of months. May bring them back, but I'm kind of enjoying not doing them, to be honest with you. So.
Copy that. All right. Yep. I get you. Okay. So, but I love them. I really do. Believe it or not, a lot of you guys, I'll say I don't want to say the originators, but you guys kind of, you've been in the game way longer than me, and you inspired me. And I would say you guys inspired me to get to where I'm at now and pushing myself, getting that confidence. And so it's really cool. Now, excuse me, what was the name of your podcast for those that don't know?
It's called The Last Frame Live.
And what was your mission for that podcast?
The mission for the podcast was really, to give people access. But my photography education mission is to help photographers develop a better understanding of the hows and whys behind making consistently great photographs. So everything I talk about, everything I teach, everything I do, that's the framework. Notice there was no gear in there, right? But the last frame was really an opportunity when YouTube came out with the live streaming. I was actually one of the first people to start live streaming on YouTube's platform, period. And it was really just an opportunity for people to have access, you know, and you get it, I'm sure, Robert. People leave you comments when you make a video. And a lot of times the questions are maybe kind of a 50,000-foot question, but you can tell they're looking for a 5-foot answer. They want all the details, but there's a lot of information they're not giving you, right? So it's really kind of hard to give a good answer, and then you're just wasting your time. So I thought, you know what, if I do these live streams, just like your audience does, they can show up, they can ask questions, and we can tackle topics that people are struggling with.
Right on. And ironically, that's kind of the angle I like going toward too. And again, maybe there's a little bit of me of multiple, I don't want to call you influencers, but educators on YouTube.
Sure.
And so absolutely, I like that. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I've always held you to a high esteem. Now, with that said, let's get into the first. Oh wait, first of all, is there anything you want to share with the audience that you got going on?
Nah, man, I'm here to talk about exposure and anything else you got going on. So dive in, do your business, and we'll get into it. Go for it.
Awesome. Okay, so first is I want to talk about the latest news or announcement by Nikon here. Yeah, let's talk about that. So Nikon drops their first ever full frame video lens. It's the Nikon Z 28-135 f4 power zoom. Now, I know this isn't like changing the world, but to me, it's sending a clear signal out there, especially for Z mount, you know, after the acquisition of Red, for them to go toward more of a very video-centric, cine-centric lens, I think says a lot positively for Nikon shooters and for mirrorless shooters in general, quite honestly. But what are your thoughts about this kind of a move?
My thoughts, I think that you're going to see everybody do it, number one. You know, just like Sony was first with a global shutter, bringing it to market. You know, Nikon's the first with coming out with these lenses. My prediction is this. Over the course of the next 10 years, you're going to see cameras in general flip upside down from the way that we know them now. And so hear me out, because when I say this, some of you are going to say right out of the box, he's full of crap, or some of you are going to run for the hills because you're like, oh my God, I can't spend that kind of money. And others just don't like change. But the world changes. Get over it. You know how that went with the dinosaurs, so don't be a dinosaur, right? My prediction is this. Our cameras, and notice I'm saying the word camera generically. So I don't care if you're a video photographer or a still photographer, but we'll keep the focus on still photography, even though it's a video lens. Stick with me. Our cameras are going to become video centric, meaning video first, stills secondary. Now, be clear. I'm not saying still photography is going away. Still photography is never going to go away. And the simple reason behind that is it doesn't matter how many people like it. The simple reason it won't go away is because the still image allows us, our brains, to see things that we can't see in real time in a video. That's why if you watch the World Series last night, they've got cameras that are shooting 240 frames a second to be able to show you, you know, inch by inch, what's happening at a play or an at-bat or any of that kind of stuff. Because when we watch it in real time, we can't see it. We don't know what happened, right? Still photography is never going to go away. But the way that we capture still images is going to flip. The cameras will be video-centric first. And then let's say you're shooting a portrait. I'm going to keep it real simple, right? So, because I suck at math, so I can give you easy numbers this way. Let's say you're going to shoot a portrait. You're going to set your subject up. You're going to say, okay, listen, I want you to look happy. You're going to press the button. And we'll say, hypothetically, it shoots a 4-second burst. So by today's standards, 4 seconds, 30 frames a second, that's 120 frames. Every photographer anywhere is going to say, I don't want to have to cull through 120 frames every time I press the button. Of course not. But what you're going to do when you're done that shoot, and you'll shoot more than several presses, so you're going to potentially have a couple thousand frames on a global shutter from that session. You're going to take those frames, you're going to download them into your culling software, which may be Lightroom, it may be Bridge, it may be something new that we haven't seen yet. And essentially you're going to fill out a quick little survey, check boxes. Well, this is a portrait and I want the person smiling and I'm looking for an image where they're full face and I want their eyes nice and big. You're going to check those boxes. It's going to go through and it's going to call it and bring you back 5 or 6 best images faster than you could have done it if you'd have only shot 20 images in the portrait session. And then you're going to be able to pick the ones you want. And then you're going to go ahead and do your processing and any retouching and editing. And all of this is going to happen for a couple of reasons. Number one, it honestly makes sense, right? And all this stuff that I just talked about, by the way, we have it. We already have Google Pixel phones that will, find the best image for you and then even like eliminate people for you, right? We have Sony had cameras and somebody else has cameras that you can't actually depress the shutter unless the people's eyes are open or unless they're smiling, right? We've got all of this AI. Everybody thinks AI is brand new. Oh my God, no, AI has been around for like 20 years in our cameras. So we've got all these pieces. We've got software now that will do culling for you. It just doesn't allow you a lot of specific detailed control yet. So eventually somebody's going to start to package these things together. And no different than everybody got all excited when Sony came out with an A9 III where, you could shoot God knows how many frames in a second. And basically the idea, never miss a shot. Sure, there's a skill set that as photographers, we're all proud of, right? But at the end of the day, we never want to miss a shot. So if there's technology that's going to make sure that we never miss a shot, photographers are going to use it, period, right? So that's one of the big reasons. The other reason is real simple. If you follow any of the photography news over the last 2 years, it's almost like politics. You see the scare headlines. DSLR and mirrorless camera sales are slowing down. Nobody's buying cameras. The companies are going to go out of business. Well, the fact is camera sales have slowed down, not because of the economy, not because people aren't interested in photography, simply because there is actually a saturation point. And these new cameras that we're coming out with, while, gearheads get really excited, the average person doesn't need to replace their camera every time. I mean, how often does Sony come out with cameras? You don't need to buy a new camera every time Sony comes out with a new camera. You just don't need to, period. So these companies have a challenge, and that is for them to continue to do research and development and for them to stay in business, they've got to create new and exciting things. So they are heavily incentivized to lean into this change. But I would suggest that if you look around, all of the pieces are here. We're using them. No one's put them together yet. The global shutter is the 3rd generation of mirrorless cameras, and it's going to be the standard in every brand. It's given. Why? Because it makes sense. It simply makes sense. It absolutely makes sense.
Prosumer models, you think?
Even in prosumer models. But keep in mind, by the time it gets to the prosumer model, we're probably going to be 15 years down the road by now. Right? Because right now, you get the Sony A9 III, which was, almost $6,000, just over $6,000 camera. I told you, I'm not a gearhead, but it was expensive, right? And it was expensive at 24 megapixels. And most of the people that have used it have said, while it's more than adequate, it is a slight step down in image quality.
Yeah.
Right now, I haven't used it. So I'm just saying, look, that's the stuff you read. But the fact of the matter is, I look at that camera, aside from hardcore sports photographers, like, the guys that went and covered the Olympics or the guys that are shooting, the World Series that just ended. For the most part, that camera is a proof of concept camera for Sony. Because remember, gang, Sony doesn't actually make the bulk of their money by selling cameras to all their fanboys. Sony makes their money by selling sensors. Canon already has patents on global shutters, and they've had it actually since before Sony did for their PTZ cameras. So Sony wants to be sure that everybody's going to adopt it. And it makes sense. The more mechanical operations you take out of a camera, the longer your camera's going to last, right? So, yeah, it's coming, whether you like it or not. Now, does that mean for the rest of you that, oh my God, I got to start saving my money, I got to buy a $6,000 camera with a global shot? No, not at all, right? Because you generally don't need 1st generation gear unless you have a very specialized reason, or unless you have enough disposable income that you can go do it because you want to do it.
You want to do it. Now,
Right.
what do you, so does that, what do you think about, like, since obviously we have this lens, and then Canon the same week or a week later, whatever, a couple days later, releases 4 very video centric, consumer friendly
Yep.
cine lenses, right? In a
Sure.
sense. So yeah, I do see a shift being more on the heavier on the video side.
Absolutely.
And do you think that's going to affect photography overall? If
I
you're a
really don't.
photographer,
I think it makes photography better. It
Mm,
really does. All of this technology makes photography better. And the reason it makes it better,
mm.
it gives more people the opportunity to get better shots on a more consistent basis. And for somebody that's already experienced, or somebody that's just an old fart like me who's been shooting for 53 years, especially as I get older and my skill set maybe slows down, I'm thrilled about this technology because, one, it helps me keep up from a shooting standpoint. Plus, anytime we get technology like the global shutter, right?
Yeah.
While the global shutter is, for me, I say it's not ready for prime time yet, but some of the things that it does become new creative tools in our toolkit. And it's kind of like having AI. I'm one of those people, I may be old, but man, I love AI. AI is a gift because AI allows me to expand my creative abilities with my photography.
Is
And
there,
I
is
don't
there
want to keep
anything
doing the
specific?
same old thing.
Is there anything specific about AI that you're like, man, this thing's awesome?
All of it. I mean, honestly, all of it. Look, here's the thing with AI.
Mm,
There's going to be problems with AI, but the problems with AI is not the AI. It's the fact that there's stupid people in the world.
mm.
Okay. There will be people that will cheat. There will be people that will take advantage of it. In fact, there's probably companies that have cheated already by not, respecting copyrights and that kind of stuff. Sure.
Oh
That's
yeah.
people. That's not the AI. The AI, things like, I saw somebody was mentioning, generative fill and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. All those tools, those are creative tools that allow us to really expand our abilities and our potential. Now, there will be, um, there will be photographers, and I use the word photographers like it says in the dictionary, a person who takes pictures. Okay. So it's not about professional or the quality, but there will be photographers that will not put in the effort to take great pictures or to make great pictures. And they'll do a lot of the work in AI. And you know what? Sometimes those photographers will get amazing images. Other times, those photographers are not going to be able to have AI get their work to a higher level.
Mm.
You're not going to get the consistency. The only way you get the consistency is to build foundational tools. So even as the cameras get smarter and smarter and do more and more for us, there will be some foundational skills that maybe we don't need to worry about as much, even potentially some foundational skills that we can forget about because technology has been able to pick up and do all the heavy lifting, but there's still going to be foundational skills that we need if we're going to be able to elevate our work to a point where it's going to stand out and it's going to get noticed.
Well, it's funny that you say that because that's a great segue to today's main topic. I have a set of questions for you, Joe, and
Go for it.
and believe it or not, everybody, we spent total almost probably 3 hours worth of conversation during our 2 talks.
Mhm.
And I could fill up the whole afternoon with topics, really, but we're going to keep it short and sweet because he mentioned some things that I have a gripe with. All right. So first things first. Okay. First, let's check out. Let me make sure there's not any comments that's relevant. First, I want to give a shout out to Vic. Thank you very much for tuning in. Josh, thank you very much. Fajar. Who else do we have here? We have Mark Man. Thank you very much from Sacramento. Love that. We have Greg Corker in the house. Got a couple of my members. I appreciate that. We got Roy Bigsby and EF Sue. Thank you very much. No, it's not too late for the party, brother. You're welcome in. The water is warm. Jump on in, brother. All right. Now, real quick, you already know. Go ahead and follow Joe real quick on IG at Joe Edelman, and he's on Facebook as well. He has his socials there, so clearly we're just doubling up on it. And then if you're enjoying what you're hearing so far and you're mad at us, well, be mad and use that aggression towards smashing that like, that share, subscribe. Okay. You know, it's all about the way you use your aggression. Okay. We're trying to channel it in a positive way. Let's go over a few things. First is, Joe, this one I want folks to hear about. Let's talk about it. Gear versus photography. Remember, you this was during our first talk. You mentioned
Yep.
this. And what do photographers get wrong when it comes to being a better photographer and then all this gas, you know, that's in the air, right?
Well, so let's take it backwards. I
Okay.
will try to give some grace. Toys are fun, right? We all know that. I recently, 2 months ago, switched from the Sony A7 IVs and bought 2 Sony A1 bodies because I'm shooting a lot of sports right now. And it was fun getting them. They're very impressive cameras. Feature sets that are really, really awesome for sports. I don't need them for anything else that I shoot. I had a lot of fun getting to know them, you know, getting accustomed to them, etc. So toys are fun, but just like I was talking about with AI and a lot of these things that are happening with camera design and features and that we're getting, the gear can only take you so far, period. And a large part of that, gang, is because, let's face it, we don't actually use cameras. So can we hit a baseline here for a second? None of us are using cameras unless you're shooting film. And if you're shooting film, just remember what your mama taught you. That's a 4-letter word. Okay.
But what'd you just say? You said
I said we don't use cameras. We use computers that are capable of recording images. And I want to be really clear. I think that's freaking awesome. Like, I'm not one of those old guys that's like, oh, it was so much better back then. Heck no. This is such an amazing time to be a photographer right now. Such an amazing time. But these are computers that record images. What's cool about that, right, is that it can do a lot of heavy lifting for us. But because it's a computer, even with advancements in AI, and maybe this will change 20 or 25 years from now, but not for quite a while, the computer still can't understand exactly what we see, and more importantly, what we imagine. Now, if you don't think that's a big deal, let me just be clear, because I'm Joe Edelman, and it's great that Robert thinks, you know, I'm special and all that, but I'm nobody. Robert, you're out in San Francisco, correct?
Yeah, for
Cool.
now.
So we're going to talk about a fellow Californian, Ansel Adams. You can find plenty of interviews online from Ansel Adams before he passed, where he talked about what he saw or imagined in his mind's eye. Computers are not capable of understanding that. So at the end of the day, for quite a long time to come, the best images are going to come from the people, and especially on a consistent basis, they're going to come from the people who put in the time to learn the foundational skills. So that means learn the gear that you have, whether it's the latest gear or whether it's 3 generations old or 4 generations old, doesn't matter, but learn the gear that you have, learn how to use it, but understand it's a tool. And from there, you learn the foundational skills that are going to allow you to, 1, create consistently, and 2, continue to create more and better things. Doing the same old thing over and over again, look, it works for some people because it's mindless and they kind of don't have to work that hard. I find that really boring, right? I want to do things different. I'm proud to say I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. I really don't. It will have a camera involved for sure. But just like I'm shooting a lot of sports right now and I'm making money shooting sports, I never thought that if you would have told me 5 years ago that I'd be doing this now, I would have laughed at you.
Interesting.
I'm having a blast because I shot sports when I was, you know, in my teens and early 20s as a newspaper photographer, and I'm having a blast going back and doing it again. I still do studio work. I still do my fashion portraits, but the whole gear versus photography thing, I kind of think of it too. Just one other comparison, which I think I mentioned to Robert before. I'm the kind of guy with my car. I drive a hybrid. It's a Hyundai, right? The car's job is to get me from point A to point B reliably every time. That's kind of how I look at my cameras. I fully understand there are people whose cars are like a member of the family. They can tell you everything there is to know about that car and what's under the hood and all that kind of stuff. And that's really where their pleasure comes from, not from the fact that the car, will get you from point A to point B. In fact, a lot of motorheads that I know, their cars are breaking down all the time. But there's things about that car they love, right? And you're always going to have that. But if you are a gearhead, and I'm not saying that in a negative way, but if you are a gearhead, you've also kind of got to be honest with yourself that unless you're willing to put in a lot of effort on top of that gear knowledge, you're going to have to be willing to settle for work that is at a quality level where the camera's doing most of the lifting. The people that are out there making big bank as photographers, and there are a lot of people making big bank as photographers. All this crap about you can't make money in photography is baloney. It's absolute baloney. But those photographers, they're not following trends. They're not worried about their gear. Their gear is tools. It's like a contractor, right? In fact, I had a roofer fix a couple shingles on my roof this morning. So before he goes up on the roof, he goes in the back of his truck. And I even asked him, when he opened up the back, in the box, there's 3 hammers. And as soon as I saw it, that was the trigger for me. I said, you've got 3 hammers. Why'd you pick that one? He had a very specific reason why he would use one hammer for the job he was about to do for me and why he would use the other 2 hammers. That's what cameras are, and lenses and lights. They're tools, right? We build the skill set then that allows us to do the work. And the work, for me at least, and I don't ever let anybody tell you what photography should be for you. But for me, the work is creating or capturing a moment.
So like the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's funny that you say that because people are commenting right here. I want to say E of Sue, he says right here, well, he had a quick question. He said, do you do your own edits? I guess that's
so I do my own edits, but I have farmed some stuff out over the years, EF Sue. There's no shame in that. Unfortunately, I'm old enough that I remember taking pictures, putting the film in the mail, and then you wait 7 days to find out how much it sucked, right? So now we get to find out instantly, and we can correct the problem. But look, there are plenty of people that don't like sitting in front of a computer processing images. So what my recommendation is, understand this. Your cameras are designed to shoot images that need to be processed. Are there reasons for shooting JPEGs? Of course there are. Are there business reasons for shooting JPEGs? Of course there are. But in general, RAW is going to give you the best quality and the most flexibility for you to create, right? But if that's not your thing, sure, you can send it out. There's no law that says you can't be a photographer if you don't process your own stuff. I would, however, my advice, learn how to do it yourself before you farm it out. That way, you're going to be able to communicate better with the person that's doing your processing, your retouching. You're not going to get great results if you just shoot stuff and kind of throw it over the wall and have somebody do it and it comes back to you, right? It's going to be like a lot of what we've been talking about. Sometimes it'll be just fine. Other times it's going to completely miss the mark because they can't read your mind. Totally. Even these AI tools like images, somebody mentioned image and AI before, and that they're getting really good at it. But the simple reality is they're not 100%, right? They're just not. They require human input because computers still can't see what our brains see and think. That's a little ways down the road. By the time they're putting chips in there, maybe that'll change, right? But not yet.
Yeah, I could see Elon Musk creating something, unfortunately. He said he loves your work on IG, and he said that the skin tones and textures, colors, lighting, wow. So shout out to
you, EFSU. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, he loves your creativity. So I just want to put that out there. And look at that. Look at this. This is kind of, he's kind of online of what you're talking about. He's like, he used to shoot raw. Now he's like, he's delivering JPEGs because having images now is more valuable to clients than having a perfect image later.
Sure. And there are numerous business models where that makes 100%, sense that it is the smart thing to do. And that's kind of the challenge with the whole, RAW versus JPEG argument, actually, and that highlights a good point, gang. Like I'm going to go and jump up to 50,000 feet above that argument. We tend to get, when we debate things in photography, and I say I've been in the middle of those debates too. I'm guilty. We're all guilty, right? We tend to get into these debates where it's like, we want a binary answer. We want it to be yes or no, black or white, right or wrong, especially so that we can walk away and say, I got it right. Well, here's the problem. In photography, the only thing that's binary is the stuff that falls under the category of physics. There's a right or wrong answer there. Everything else, the creative aspects and the business aspects, there are no binary answers. What's right for me is not going to be right for you or for the next guy. What I like is not necessarily what Robert's going to like, and that's not necessarily what Agnos is going to like. And that's okay. That's kind of what makes it fun and interesting, because we can be individuals and be ourselves. Because, a lot of you, if you're trying to make money, if you've ever caught yourself saying, there's just too much competition. No, there's not. I don't care where you are. It doesn't matter where you are. Competition is a choice. There's only one you, period. So you have no competition. The only way you have competition is if you've made the choice to shoot the same trends and the same things that everybody else is shooting. And that's lazy. It simply is. It's just lazy, right? I'm not trying to insult anybody, but so that, to me, that's the fun of it. We can all be very different, all be very unique, and we can learn more by listening to people. Even like, Agnos, I've been in, many like Facebook groups or live streams where he would have typed in that statement about used to shoot RAW and now it's JPEGs, and it would have started a flame war. Like, to me, what I'd rather know when I read that, I'd rather say, that's cool. I've heard of a lot of business models where that makes sense. Agnos, what kind of business model are you using it for? And the reason why that interests me is because it may be a business model I've never thought of. It may be a use that I've never thought of. So to me, I'm always kind of looking at what's behind the information, not that it's got to be right or wrong.
You're not looking for a right or wrong, basically.
Yeah, life's too short. It's like,
well, you ain't lying. Let's see anything. Okay, cool. All right. So next thing, this is kind of the meat and potatoes of today. So I want to go over this first and foremost. What photographers keep getting wrong when it comes to exposure. Okay. Because when you brought this up, this absolutely blew my mind when you were just talking about it, that I the audience needs to hear what you said to me. Okay. What do we keep getting wrong here?
So pretty much all of it, to be honest with you. So, but let me break that down, because I know that just upsets some people. So let's deal with the exposure triangle thing first and get that out of the way. I saw your poll, Robert, that 76% say that they use the exposure triangle with their photography. And I don't want to embarrass anybody. And Robert, I'm not even going to ask you to define it. But I want you all to think for a moment before I continue talking. And I really, seriously, I'm going to ask you, please do this for me. I want you to think that if you were sitting face to face to me right now, and we were just having a conversation, and if I said to you, could you explain to me the exposure triangle and the value of it, or what it does for me? Could you explain it? The fact of the matter is, you can't.
I was going to try.
Oh, go ahead, Robert. Oh, try it. Go for it. Go for it. And I won't embarrass you. So go for it.
Boy, hold on. Let me. All right. So I have a sound effect for everything.
There you go.
The exposure triangle for me is a set of variables that will help you to get the desired result in a quicker amount of time. So when I set the shutter, I'm really asking myself, how much motion do I want in my photo? When I shut aperture, how much depth of field do I want? And ISO overall is to help balance out the exposure overall between while still giving the desired motion and depth of field in my shot. So it's kind of like, so that's how I've approached it.
let me just point out to you, and actually that's a very good answer. However, let me point out to you that really what you did is you explained the purposes behind shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. You did not explain what the triangle does. So here's the rub, gang. All right. And believe me, this isn't just about disproving the exposure triangle. There's a better end game, especially for you mirrorless shooters. Okay. The exposure triangle was an accident. It is literally a creation of the internet. Now, I know some of you, especially if you're like my generation or older, are going to be like, no. I learned about the exposure triangle when I first started taking pictures, and that was like in the 1980s. No, you didn't, actually. So, and I'll show you the proof, because as Robert said, I bring receipts. Okay. The first mention of anything close to an exposure triangle anywhere in the world was a book that was published in 1990. This is a book called Understanding Exposure by Brian Peterson. A lot of you have heard of Brian Peterson, great photographer. He's written a ton of books. Okay. In his book, he uses the phrase, or excuse me, it states, he explains how to successfully combine aperture, shutter speed, and film, because this was in the film days, 1990. Goes on to say the elements that compose what Peterson refers to as, quote, the photographic triangle. And that's it. That's all that's mentioned in the book. There's no pictures of triangles, no diagrams, no nothing. Now, 1990. We fast forward a lot. 2005. So now we're in the digital era, right? 2005, a gentleman by the name of Jim Miyake, which some of you may be familiar with, betterphoto.com. He started the website, betterphoto.com. Jim Miyake wrote this book called The Better Photo Guide to Digital Photography. Now, I'm not trying to discredit it, because it's actually a very good, or discredit Jim, but this is actually a very good book. At the time he wrote this book, he was employed full-time as a web developer for Alaska Airlines. He's never worked as a full-time photographer. So in this book, he references on page, I believe it's page 60, he references Peterson's book, okay? And, you know, he says in his classic book, Understanding Exposure, Brian Peterson refers to the triangular relationship. Nobody's ever been able to explain to me, and Robert didn't either. What is the triangular relationship between shutter speed, aperture, and ISO? Triangle doesn't do that, right? But anyway, he explains the triangular relationship between those, in which he calls the photographic triangle. Looking at these three together, I think it might be better suited to call it the exposure triangle. That's what Miyake says. No pictures, no diagram of a triangle. The very first exposure triangle diagram showed up on the internet in the year 2006.
Really?
You can use the Internet Wayback Machine or Internet Archives to go find that. And if you look it up now, you will find that there is literally hundreds of thousands of diagrams of exposure triangle. Roy Bixby, I'd love you to pull that book out and show me a screen capture of it, because I don't think you can. Okay.
There we go.
The books, Roy Bixby here says that he's got a Kodak publication mentioning the exposure triangle from the 1970s. Love to see it, because I know you don't. So by all means, prove me wrong and show me a screen capture of it. There's this thing called the Mandela Effect, folks. It's the fact that pretty much most of the world thought that Nelson Mandela was still in a prison in South Africa, even though, and had died for that matter, even though he was like the president of South Africa. Okay. Where, you know, basically, and it's a real thing. You can Google the Mandela Effect. I'm not making that up. It's basically where large groups of people wind up, you know, buying into this fact that's not a fact. And we're not talking politics. We're just talking general facts. Okay. So that's the problem with the exposure triangle. Even if Roy can actually prove me wrong on the dates, which he can't, it still doesn't actually teach you anything. All the exposure triangle does, at best, it helps you remember that the three settings that we use for exposure are shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. But here's the thing. Science has also proven that the average human can easily remember 7 things easily. That's like why phone numbers used to be 7 digits long time ago. Okay. So If you need a triangle to remember the names of 3 settings on your camera, because the triangle doesn't tell you what the settings do. If you need a triangle to remember the names of 3 settings on your camera, you've got bigger problems. I'm just keeping it real, right? So it's useless. Not to mention, now here's where it gets deep. So if I haven't stressed you out yet, now I'm going to stress you out. Brian Peterson, Jim Miyake, in their books, where they refer to ISO as an exposure setting, I would actually suggest that that's incorrect. Now, follow along. Let's start with film, and I think you'll understand it a lot better. You decided what film you were going to shoot before you left the house to take pictures. It was Tri-X, it was Kodacolor 100, Kodachrome. You could shoot ASA 25 or 64, and you put that in your camera. Now, you had a light meter, which was not a computer, but it was a basic light meter setup. So you had to let that light meter know how sensitive is the film that I just put in the camera. So you would set that number to inform the light meter so that the light meter could help you figure out the best combination of shutter speed and aperture to get the right amount of light. So ASA, ISO, they weren't exposure settings. That was the setting that you had to inform the camera how sensitive is the film. Fast forward to digital technology now. In fact, even Nikon, we were talking about Nikon earlier.
Yeah.
I'm going to have Robert share some links at the end of the show to articles that I wrote about this. And in the articles, you can find the links to Nikon's website. On Nikon's website, they even get it confused.
Wow.
There's a link to one page on Nikon's website where they tell you very straightforward, cameras don't have ISO. ISO is simply gain. It's a volume control. And then on another page, they say that changing the ISO increases the sensitivity, which is factually wrong. In fact, in Miyake's book in 2005, after he talks about the exposure triangle, 3 pages later, he says in 2005 that increasing the ISO increases the sensitivity of your camera. No, it doesn't. That is 100% factually wrong. I don't care what camera you own, what brand it is, what model it is. That's wrong. Now, why does this matter? Why should it even be part of the conversation? Simply because, look, it's 2024. We're almost in 2025. That means that we are 24, almost 25 years into the digital revolution. The first consumer professional digital camera came out actually in late 1999. So we could say actually we are 25 years in. Okay, and that was a Nikon D1, 2.5 megapixels. How did we ever survive 2.5 megapixels, right?
Wow.
Okay, that was the first one. That's the first camera. So the fact of the matter is, here we are now. Fast forward 25 years, we are in the 3rd generation already of digital cameras. DSLRs were first, mirrorless cameras were second, and going back to the conversation we started with Nikon's new lens and the Sony A9 III, global shutters are going to bring the 3rd generation of digital cameras. So we're 3 generations in, but yet as an industry, we still talk about exposure the same way we did in the last century when everybody shot film. And we do it, honestly, because we're lazy. Because if we're keeping it real, folks, many of you haven't actually taken the time to really learn exposure and how it works. And you're still trying to set exposure the old-fashioned way. In fact, here, this will irritate some people. And by the way, if you're a DSLR shooter, everything I'm about to say now, you're not going to want to do it yet. But when you come on over to the dark side and start shooting mirrorless, okay, remember this because it will help you, right? Mirrorless shooters that shoot shutter priority or aperture priority. Why? It's actually why? I hate to use this word, but it's the first word that comes to mind, and I don't have a lot of filters. It's actually dumb to shoot shutter. And I'm gonna break it down for you. Here we go. All right. In fact, Robert gave me the setup. I'm gonna quote Robert.
Oh no.
When Robert tried to answer when Robert tried to answer what the exposure triangle is, he talked about how he chooses his shutter speed. It's got a purpose behind it. He wants to make sure that he's going to stop whatever action is in the scene, or if he's using a longer lens, or like that last video that he did with that Nikon planar lens, that's a beefy lens, right? So you want to make sure that you're using a shutter speed that's fast enough that you're not going to get camera motion. So remember this statement: shutter speed is a purpose-driven setting. Yeah, maybe you're going to do like shutter drag pictures, right? Then you're going to use shutter speed creatively. But for the most part, remember, there's nothing binary. But for the most part, shutter speed is a purpose-driven setting. So then when we get to aperture, I would recommend that you remember this sentence: aperture is an emotional setting. Aperture really has the biggest impact on the overall kind of vibe of your picture. You know, if you shoot at f1.2 or f2 or whatever that lens was to get that razor thin depth of field and that creamy bokeh background that so many people like, or if you decide to shoot at f16 so you're getting lots of depth and lots of detail in your picture, you're creating two very different feelings in the image. So shutter speed with purpose, aperture with emotion, and then the ISO, all you're doing with it is making your picture lighter or darker. That's it.
Wow.
Now, a lot of you, if you're older like me and you were around in the early 2000s and maybe you shot with a Nikon D1, you probably still suffer from a little bit of PTSD when it comes to ISO. Because if you use those cameras, you know that by the time you got to ISO 400, you were already seeing a whole lot of noise. And at 800, those images were horrible, right?
At 800? Wow.
Oh, God, with the D1? Heck yeah. But that's not the problem anymore, right? We can raise our ISO way above that. And even beyond that, way higher yet with the noise utilities that we have, both AI and non-AI. So we can shoot at much higher ISOs. Yes, if we're going to speak of it in the binary sense, in other words, physics, right? And if we were going to bench test a sensor, you will get technically better image quality at the base ISO, of course. But the fact of the matter is, since the cameras now have bigger and more powerful processors, since the software is very improved, you can go much higher ISO and still maintain very functional image quality. And I will point out, gang, because I'm old, back in the film days, our images had grain.
Even at 200?
Right? That was part of the picture.
But
then we got to digital.
Wait, Joe, was it even at 200? Did you notice any or not?
Oh, yeah. Even if you were shooting a roll of film like ASA 25 in Kodachrome, there was grain. Absolutely.
Interesting.
All film had grain. And we just accepted that, right? But then when digital technology came out, we hit noise. But the noise that we started with in the early days of digital, it was colored and it was like the noise you would get on a television screen, right? It was horrible. So somewhere between like 2005 and 2015, our industry kind of flipped around, and suddenly the idea of having any, and I'm not going to use the word grain or noise, I'm going to use the word texture. Suddenly having any texture in an image became bad. Why?
Interesting. So,
right? I mean, because now what happens? Here we are now, 25 years into digital. Everybody fusses about noise, is afraid to raise their ISO, but then they go out and they spend $100 on a plugin so they can add grain back into their pictures. Oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? Okay. So it's like, come on, there's a balance point for everything. And in the series of articles that Rob will share the links for, I have a breakdown about how your sensors really work. That's written in English. It's not PhD or engineer speak, but it's been signed off on by an engineer from Nikon and from Olympus, who I have had the good fortune of getting to know over the years. And there's also an article in there about what I refer to as the ISO tolerance test. And it's a way for you with your mirrorless cameras to do a little test. It'll take you 15 minutes to figure out what is the highest ISO that I am comfortable shooting at without having to use any kind of noise software. And that's a reference point that you should know. And all of you with mirrorless cameras, I don't care what model, what brand, you can set your camera to auto ISO, and your camera has an additional setting in it that allows you to cap how high the ISO will go when you're in auto ISO. So if you figure out, I'll give you an example with my Sony A1s, my ISO tolerance, meaning this is the highest I'm going to go without touching some kind of noise correction, is 8,000 ISO. I can get up to 12,000 and a little bit higher with very, very minimal noise, but noise reduction, okay? And still not touching any AI stuff at that point. But 8,000, I'm absolutely fine with that image. Absolutely fine. So, and I completely lost my train of thought there. I apologize.
No, and that's, would you be
knowing what you want that number to be, 8,000, I can go into the menu, and you can do this on any camera. And I can say, listen, when I'm on auto ISO, never go above 8,000. And then that way, if I get a situation where the camera needs more light, it blinks at me and says, hey, I need more light than 8,000. And then I'm going to make a conscious decision. Yeah, I want to take the picture. I know I'm probably going to have to do noise reduction or do AI noise reduction, and I can override that really quickly. So the way that I control my exposure is, and this is for every picture, and now I know as soon as I say this, like if any of you shoot birds or different things, you're going to be like, no, it's got to be the other one. Hear me out. I'm not telling you what's more important. I'm giving you a workflow. When I pick up a camera to take a picture, I don't care if it's in a studio or at a sporting event, the first setting I shoot is my shutter speed, always. I didn't say it's the most important, so some of you are starting to type, relax a second, hear me out. I set my shutter speed first because that is a purpose setting. I need to make sure that I'm picking a speed that's going to stop any action or prevent camera motion. Second setting then is aperture. The emotional setting. Do I want this picture to have razor thin depth of field, or do I want lots of depth of field with lots of detail? Those are decisions that you should be making every picture you ever take. Ever. So the idea of shutter priority and aperture priority, yes, they were very helpful with DSLRs. So I'm not talking about DSLRs. And then going to the ISO, and I think Derek Benton Photography just got a step ahead of him here, but he's got it. He said he's read about noise when he researched the difference between medium format and higher end. And then he says, here's the key, the ISO setting should just be an exposure compensation dial. Yes.
Oh, so
my cameras live on auto ISO with one exception. I'll tell you that exception in a second. They live on auto ISO. And with my Sony well, actually all the Sony cameras, by default, the back corner of the camera is the thumb wheel for exposure compensation. Different cameras are laid out differently, but they're all customizable today, right? So you can pick wherever you want your exposure compensation to be. So when I'm looking through my EVF, electronic viewfinder, for those of you that are DSLR people, again, you'll come over to the dark side eventually. When I'm looking through my EVF, remember, what you see is what you get. I'm seeing the finished picture. So if it looks a little dark, I can lighten it. If it looks a little light, I can darken it on the fly in real time. So I'm not using auto in the sense of like auto and forget about it. That never works out well, right? Remember, they're computers. They can do a really good job, but they're not perfect. So I'm letting the computer basically evaluate the scene, put me in the ballpark, and then I'm simply saying, yeah, you know what? That's a little hot. I want to bring it down. It's a little underexposed. The shadows are blocked up. I want to bring it up. Boom, done.
And
Simple.
that's what you do with exposure comp.
Right. The only variation on that, the only time I'm not doing the exposure compensation situation is if I'm in the studio, right? Because I'm working with strobes.
And it's controlled.
So I'm just simply going to set the base ISO at that point and set my shutter speed and my aperture. But it's always shutter speed first, Aperture second, ISO is the brightness. For some photographers, depending on what you shoot, shutter speed is the more important setting. For other photographers, depending on what you shoot, aperture is the more important setting. So I'm not talking about which is more important. I'm talking about a workflow so that you're doing things consistently every time. Because another mistake photographers make is maybe they do shoot aperture priority or shutter priority. So when they're shooting one thing, they're doing this settings on the camera. Then when they're shooting another thing, they're doing these settings on the camera. And then they wind up screwing it up because they forget to switch the camera back, or they miss a shot because they're like, oh crap, I'm on aperture priority today. And they're trying to change the wrong setting. You know, you've done it. Why do that? Those settings for mirrorless cameras don't make sense. So now somebody should be typing, well, then why are they still there, Joe? They're still there. They're still there for the same reason we still have ISO. When they were designing these new digital cameras back in the 1980s, probably with some input from marketing people, they realized that if they changed the names of the features on the cameras, photographers would probably freak out and not adopt digital technology, because it's hard to imagine photographers getting all upset about change. I mean, it's just hard to imagine.
Right? I know it is.
So they kept ISO. So when they started making mirrorless cameras, they kept shutter priority and aperture priority, because if they would have taken it away, there would have been a whole lot of birding or landscape photographers who would have been freaking out and saying, I'm never buying a mirrorless camera.
So you're saying, Joe, you're saying if I know I'm going to shoot X, and I know generally this is my shutter I want, this is my aperture, set it and forget it. Are we doing that? Is that a slogan we can go by? Set it and forget it and just rock the ISO.
Set it, forget it until the situation changes. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So like if you're shooting a sporting event, that's a set it and forget it, make the picture lighter or darker, right? Even if you're wandering around, you know, on a hike, and so maybe you're taking pictures of a tree, then it's a flower, then, you know, oh, there's a bird. Okay. You can still basically, when you start the walk, and this is what any photographer should be doing anyway, right? When you start the walk, you're going to be like, well, all right, I'm not expecting a lot of motion. Maybe you don't expect to see any birds. Okay. I'm not expecting a lot of motion. It's all inanimate objects. So, you know, we'll go with like 250th of a second, just so I have some extra stability. That's going to be fine. I want to shoot with lots of depth because these are kind of scenic things. So I'm going to go ahead and set my aperture to f11. Cool. Now you're a quarter of a mile into the walk and you see a really cool flower. You decide, you know what? I want to shoot really close, but I definitely don't want all that depth of field because the background's not all that exciting. So I want to get that as blurry as I can. So now you're going to, again, still go through the mental process, right? My shutter speed's fine at 250, but I want more shallow depth of field, so I'm going to open my lens up. Camera's going to give me its recommendation for ISO as I'm looking at it. I'm basically going to say, yeah, that looks really good. Or, you know what, that's a little too bright. Let me just darken that a little bit. 1 or 2 clicks, boom, and I'm there, and I'm good to go, right? And then indeed, that bird shows up, okay? If I don't miss the bird because I'm trying to get my long lens on the camera out of my backpack, then I'm going to go ahead and say, well, a couple things here, man. I got to get that shutter speed up, and I want to make sure that I'm still shooting wide open. Well, I was already wide open for the flower. Gang, that's photography. That's how you take pictures, right? So the cameras, the mirrorless cameras, they're making it a whole lot easier.
Well, Roy actually looks like he's agreeing with you right here. ISO isn't sensitivity anymore. It's just gain. You know?
It's actually, it is absolutely gain. In fact, the 2 links on the Nikon website, like I said, one of them, Nikon still talks about sensitivity. The other one, they refer to it as gain. And that's what it is. So I do have, it's a 4-part article series. And seriously, folks, those of you that are listening, I'm not saying this to be cocky. I started talking this about 1.5 years ago, and at first I kept looking over my shoulder like somebody's going to blow me out of the water and tell me that like I'm smoking, right?
They're gonna get you.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for somebody to say you're nuts and here's why. So literally when you read the articles, there's a contact form on that website. If you really think I'm crazy, I'd love to talk to you. Send
Joe,
me a message on the contact and let's hop on a quick, Zoom call. I don't want to argue with you. I'd love to hear your perspective on it. I put a lot of thought into this, and since I'm somebody that goes out and teaches a lot, it really does drive me nuts how much misunderstanding of the technology that we use that exists today. And the reason why that drives me nuts is because you're all spending a crap ton of money on this gear and this hobby or this profession, and you're really not able to take full advantage of it if you actually don't understand how it really works, right? That's the problem. So the other challenge now with that statement is when we start getting into sensors and photodiodes and photocells and amplification, and believe it or not, all of your digital sensors, all of them are actually analog. They're not digital. Swallow that one. The software is what creates the digital image from an analog capture. So right away, it's like, wait a minute, I don't want to have to learn all that stuff. I don't want to have to understand that stuff. But as an industry, we have a need to find a way to simplify the conversation. So even this exposure triangle, and many of you have probably lived through this. I do a lot of talks for camera clubs, in person and virtually. And never fails, I'll be at a camera club meeting or I'll be on a Zoom with a camera club, and some older camera club member starts talking about the exposure triangle. And it's usually to a new or younger photographer. You got to learn the exposure triangle. And I really just want to blurt out. It's like, could you really explain to me? Please explain to me the exposure triangle. I still haven't found a person that can actually explain how the exposure triangle works beyond just being a memorization technique. So, and in those articles, when you get to the last of the articles, there's actually a quote that I recommend. It's kind of the summary of all of that. Choose your shutter speed with purpose, your aperture with feeling, and then adjust your brightness with ISO. It's that simple. So it's a little mnemonic. It's a memory technique, super easy, but we need to get to a point where we can simplify the conversation so that everybody can really maximize what they're getting out of
the settings,
their cameras and their gear. Roy, I have heard the bit about three. So I'm sorry, Roy, I should read it out loud. Roy wrote back, "You're right, Joe. In the 70s, the Kodak article doesn't say exposure triangle. It says the three sides of exposure." And I have seen the three sides of exposure, but yes, the triangle didn't come about until 1990 as a photographic triangle, 2005 as the exposure triangle. And by the way, folks, a lot of you may not know what that book is that Roy is talking about. When Robert's answering some questions in a minute or two, I'll hop out of here and grab mine. I want you to see it.
Yes.
Somebody needs to make an iPhone and an Android app that is the modern equivalent of that book. It's a book that Kodak used to produce. You could get a little tiny pocket version or a slightly bigger one. It even had a gray card and a color chart in it. Every photographer carried one in their camera bag. Like, that was every bit as important as film and your camera. And they were great because you could figure out how to do anything with that Kodak photo guide. And the problem that you have, a lot of people say, well, we have YouTube now and we have the internet. Well, yeah, but the problem is you're only getting part of the story. Kodak broke it down really simple, and they gave you like little spin wheel, dials and that you could figure out exposure settings, all that kind of stuff. It was great.
Wow.
And I haven't found an app that does that yet, because everybody's much quicker to, let's go look it up on YouTube. And then you find some bozo with big hair that's going to tell you, what piece of gear you need to buy to solve the problem. And that's not going to happen.
So with that said, I want to, because I know I actually have to get out of here by 6:30. So if you need to run and get something, Joe, feel free to take that time. Do you want to go get
I'll
something?
grab it right now.
Okay. All right, everybody. While Joe is getting more receipts for us, okay, because that's what I want you. I see you guys are really resonating with the facts he's dropping. Okay. In the meantime, in between times, make sure you go ahead and follow Joe over there on IG and Facebook at Joe Edelman. And of course, if you haven't already, you already know, you should have liked, share, and subscribe to this channel. That's right. And hit the bell icon to get notifications when I go live. I'll be live next week. And then also when new videos are uploaded. All right, Joe is back. What's he got for us?
Yeah, so this is the Kodak Professional Photo Guide. And again, they had a pocket-sized version. It was like half size of this, right? So when you open this up, you've got all these tabs that are across the top. And, you know, there's a section for film data. Let's see, exposure meters, daylight tables, existing light, color temperature, filters, flash, film flash, camera lenses, depth of field, close-up, exposure dial, and then perspective. And there's even, I mentioned before, there's even a gray card and color chart and grayscale in there. But what's great about this book, it allowed you to solve any problem that you faced. Think about what making pictures is, gang. If you're going to make interesting pictures, right? You don't have to be the most amazing photographer in the world, but I mean, if you're going to make pictures that aren't just same old crap that we see 3,000 times a day on Instagram, being creative is problem solving. So think about it. And you know what? You've all done this. I've done it. I'm not proud of it. Robert, I know you've done it too. Photographers, we're kind of a weird bunch of people. We go out and we spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on camera gear. And then instantly, we're not happy with just a nice picture. It's got to be epic or it won't do. And obviously, social media has influence on that too. But the fact of the matter is, you know, it's almost like we take some of the joy out of photography right out of the box because we spent all this money. And as a result, all of you have done what I'm about to describe. You'll be out with your cameras. Maybe it's in the car next to you. Maybe it's in the backseat, whatever. Maybe it's on your shoulder. You've got your camera. You're walking around or you're driving down the road and you see something and you all have that urge. You know the urge. If you're a photographer, you know the urge. It's like, oh, I should take a picture of that.
Yeah.
You start to reach for the camera, but you come up short. You come up short, the hand comes back, and you're like, oh, but I don't have the right lens with me. Or, you know, but the lens isn't, the light's not really good enough. Or, but I'm not going to be able to get close enough. And then you start making excuses for not taking the picture. Why do we do that? Really, why do we do that? We had that urge that said, hey, I want to record that. And we stopped. Now, some people will pull out the phone, and that's cool. I have tons of pictures like that on my phone because I will stop and take the pictures. Even with my expensive cameras, I'll take the picture. And I know that I'm taking a picture that's barely of the quality of a snapshot. But I'm taking it because whatever it was that I saw, it was interesting. Certainly, if I have the time, if I can get close enough, if the light's right, if I have the right lens, I'm going to try and create something really special. But sometimes it's nice to just take a nice picture. But when you have a creative idea, you're now adding more challenges on top. Well, how do I achieve that? That's where this book was amazing. It helped you figure out depth of field when you couldn't see depth of field through the viewfinder. It helped you figure out your flash settings when all flashes were manual. Sadly, I'm old enough. I started photography before there were zoom lenses, before there was autofocus, and when all flashes were manual. In fact, we used to call the flashes potato mashers. So if you've heard that before, you're really old. So yeah, they were called potato mashers. They're the old Honeywell heads. And it's because basically it was a long handle with an oval shaped head on the top that looked like you could pound meat or pound potatoes with it. So they called them potato mashers.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Well, we're learning a lot today. Now, Joe, first of all, is that book still available or no?
You can find them like used on like eBay and everything. They're not still in print because none of it applies to digital. Unfortunately, that's why I say we need a modern version of it. You could kind of piece this together with different apps for your phone. Like you can get a depth of field calculator app, and you know there's different apps to do it. Somebody needs to like create the master app that is essentially the modern equivalent to this professional photo guy. And listen, if you're here and you're a programmer, since some of you may be in San Francisco and you do it, I don't want any money for it, but just make sure I get to be one of the beta testers when
There
you
you
come
go.
out. Believe me, it's gold. Anybody that ever used one will tell you it was an absolute must in the camera bag.
Wow.
And believe me, today it still holds every bit as much value.
Well,
And this is a lot more efficient and effective than going to a Facebook group. Help, quick, I'm trying to shoot something and I can't figure it out. Somebody tell me what to do. Right? Come on.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those.
Yeah, we've all had, right?
Let's see. Now, the last thing I want to mention as we're winding down, I've heard you say this a lot, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Go ahead.
On the way out, what should photographers spend their time doing?
Practice, man. Just practice. And when I say practice, like, just shoot. Too many photographers today spend all this money. I told you, photographers, we're a weird bunch in so many different ways. So I'm not trying to insult any of you. I'm there too. We all have our little, idiosyncrasies. But look, you spend all that money, use it, for crying out loud. One of the reasons why I stopped doing YouTube videos and stopped all that, I really loved doing the live streams, but it was entertainment for people. And I realized, like, okay, I've got people that are religiously every week showing up and they're commenting and they're supporting me, which is wonderful. I loved it. But they're also not going out and shooting. And so I was taking up an hour of their time that, you know what, even if they were like sitting in their bedroom taking pictures of their toes to practice depth of field and composition, that would be a lot more beneficial than listening to me talk about something on YouTube. Because the science behind learning, you can read, you can watch all you want. It's not going to stick until you try it. Creativity, I don't care if you do it with a brush. I don't care if you sculpt it. I don't care if you take pictures. I don't care what you do. Creativity requires lots and lots and lots of failure. So we all hate the failure word. So we call it practice, right? It's just trying things. It's experimenting. It's seeing where you can go. Don't follow trends. Like, John said he spends a lot of time on Instagram. I used to. I've gotten so far off of social media at this point because it is easy to get kind of stuck in it. And I do enjoy looking at good photography, but we all know there's plenty of bad photography on Instagram. But the problem of it is so much of what's there, it's just regurgitated crap. I've kind of made it a policy in my career. Now listen close, you're going to think I'm being arrogant, and I'm not. If the trend was going this way, I was over here. Here's the part. I was never the best. I'm not the best now. My big success is two things. I've managed to spend my life paying my bills with a camera, and my work is very technically clean, which is why I appreciate comments like EF Sue made earlier, because I love to hear that, because that's my goal with my work. But I'm not the greatest photographer in the world. I'm not the most creative. But
you're the most.
You've got to get out. You've got to do it. You've got to put it to work. Back in the day when we had this and we didn't have the internet and we didn't have YouTube and all that kind of stuff, which, by the way, these are great resources. But photographers learned by problem solving. Looking at a picture that they just made 3 days ago because it just came back from the lab and saying, that's really horrible. What could I have done to make it better? In fact, how many of you go out and do a shoot? Let's say you shoot 100 frames. I told you I suck at math, so we're going to keep it easy. You shoot 100 frames. You pick 5 that you like. You share them on social media. Yay. Maybe you delete the other 95. Maybe you file them away. It doesn't matter. But how many of you take the time occasionally? You don't have to do it every time. But take the time occasionally to go through those other 95 images and ask yourself the question or questions. Why? Why did I pick this one? What could I have done to make this an image that I would have picked? How could I have done that? What would it have taken? The cool part of it is if you do that within a week of your shoot, and by the way, I talk about psychology a lot. I'm married to a cognitive psychologist, right? But if you do that within a week of shooting, it's almost like doing it in real time because you can still connect emotionally to when you were taking the pictures, and you'll learn a lot Vic, do I still have the Olympus tattoo? I do still have the Olympus tattoo. The Olympus tattoo was not to celebrate Olympus. It was to celebrate a teenage dream of mine. I used to go when I was a teenager. Nikon had just started the Nikon school. And they had photographers that shot for National Geographic and some other publications that would travel around the country and do these one-day seminars. And I went to a couple of them. And I always thought that these guys were like, they were rock stars to me. It's like, how cool is it that Nikon would pay these guys and send them all around the world? And I never thought I'd have an opportunity to do something like that. I mean, I didn't live my life wanting to be a camera brand ambassador, but when the opportunity showed up, hell yeah. So I still wear it proudly. I mean, Olympus are great cameras. I still love them. I only switched back to Sony. It was a business decision. If you follow Olympus, you know that they're all in on outdoors, wildlife, nature. Even though I'm shooting a lot of sports now, I'm primarily a studio guy, right? I own that, and I'm proud of that. My job as an ambassador was to show people, hey, you can do anything with a micro four thirds camera that you can do with a full frame camera if you do good photography. So that's what I did. But I'm proud of that. I'll always be proud of that. So yeah, I still have it.
Well, your pictures speak for itself.
Appreciate
Everybody,
that.
I actually, believe it or not, I would have kept this thing going, but I have a Halloween situation.
Go for it, man.
Myself,
especially if there's kids involved, don't be late for that. Go for it. Yep.
I'm going where there's no kids involved. Okay.
Oh, so, it's that kind of Halloween situation. Okay.
Yeah, okay. But some people need to find Waldo. Okay. I need to help them out. Joe, you were absolutely a phenomenal guest. I really appreciate the immense amount of knowledge that you shared with us. And I think you would have kept going if we just kept this puppy on, you know.
Hey, man, I love talking photography, not as much as I love doing it, but it's a close second for sure.
Everybody, make sure you go ahead. Wait, before we wind it down to the ending part, is there anything you want these folks to know about you, what you got going on, follow you?
In fact, the only thing I'm gonna share with you guys, because I said we do it and I forgot those articles. I'm gonna stick them in the YouTube chat here really quick. Yes. I'm gonna put one link in, gang. And so this is the first of the 4 articles. On the bottom of the page of the article, you'll find the links to the others. So check out all 4. It'll take you probably about 30 minutes to read all of them. But I promise you, sincerely, you will not feel like you wasted your time. It's going to give you some stuff to think about. And if you really think I'm full of crap, don't leave some, jerk comment, because that's going to get ignored. If you really think I'm full of crap, go fill out the contact form. And I'd love to hear your perspective on it. I sincerely would. It's important to me that I'm helping people, not just spouting a bunch of crap.
Where's that link? I want to share that
it's in the YouTube chat.
So you did?
Here,
hold on, let me make sure I see it. I don't see it on my end on the.
All right, here, I'm gonna send it. Unless you have links turned off there. I just put it in our private chat, Robert.
Copy that. Let me just
on StreamYard. So if you want to paste it in.
Yeah, I want to just make sure.
Right. And so that's the first of the 4 articles. And then at the bottom of the page, you'll find all the articles linked. Okay.
All right, everybody. Here we go. Let me type in it's called articles. Articles, because I can spell, of course. There we go. Cool. So I just posted everybody in the live chat. You should see it right now. Go check it out. Prove Joe wrong. So with all that said, everybody, make sure you go ahead. Let me get back to my banner here. And follow Joe on IG as well as Facebook over there at Joe Edelman, of course. He used to do his amazing live streams. Maybe he will. I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. But
maybe I'll come back and I'll talk with you some more, Robert. We'll do it that way.
100%. I would love it. Well, honestly, we could keep talking, but I have some other things I think will get you going too. So we still have to go over what we talked about before we went live.
Yeah, that's
right.
Cool.
About
whenever you're ready, let me know.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Joe. Have an amazing and safe Halloween. Hopefully don't eat too much candy. Oh, you know what? Fuck it. Eat as much candy as you want. You live once. But anyway, man, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to sign out real quick. And otherwise, have a great time. I'll text you within the next week about another idea and see what we can
Cool.
set up. Sounds
Let me know.
good?
All right.
All right. Thank you,
Got it,
sir.
gang. Take care.
Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. I do want to let you all know that I really appreciate you all for hanging in there, hanging out. Okay. Thank you, Vic. Vic, you're always here. Thank you very much. Josh, thank you very much. Make sure you go ahead and, oh, hold on. I got to put on my spooky music. What am I doing? There we go. That's the outro I need. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be battling gargoyles and Draculas and whatnot. Well, that's if they could find me, right? Anyway, my dad jokes are going to be on level 12 tonight. So, with all that said, make sure you go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notifications for upcoming content. I hope you enjoyed today's talk with Joe Edelman. I know I did. Yeah, that's right. That's the Phantom Fantasy win. That's right. We won out here. Now, I do want to let you know next week, I do have another special guest. I have John Grease in the house. That's right. Studio portrait photographer out of Chicago. I got John Grease coming in and hanging out with us. So you don't want to miss that episode of the Let's Talk Photography podcast. All right. So with all that said, until next time, keep shooting, stay creative. Thank you for watching, everybody.
Join me every Thursday on YouTube for another live show of Let's Talk Photography. We cover the latest news, interviews with today's industry leaders, tips, tricks, lighting, cameras, and the business of photography. My weekly live stream is all about crowd participation. You're encouraged to ask questions, talk about the cool camera gear you've got or the camera gear you want to get. Hell, you could just join our open panel discussion during our Q&A portion of the show. The cost of access to Let's Talk Photography is very, very low. For today only, I'm hosting a very low price of free $99 to subscribe and press that bell icon to get notifications of my upcoming live streams. Now let's get back to the show.